Hey AP World History, welcome into the stream tonight. We are going to be working on Unit 3 and Unit 4. Keep in mind, I gotta point this way. It's backwards on my screen. 7 days left until the AP test. 7 days, guys. 7 days. So we've got to get going on this studying and make sure that you are getting this information in your head. Welcome in. Go ahead and grab your notebooks or whatever you're taking notes on. Hey, Wan Ying, welcome in. Did you see this? 7 days, baby. 7 days. Hey, Tammy, welcome back. Isabella, good evening to you guys. I know, 7 days. I counted them. I was like, oh my goodness, 7 days. Yes, apparently they were having some more issues today with getting stuff turned in. So hopefully by the time they get to us, they'll have all those hinks worked out, because I don't want you guys to have to take it again in June. You've worked so hard. So hopefully they'll have those things going. One thing I do want to tell you guys, make sure that you don't tweet anything about the test or put anything about the test on social media. They will be watching social media. They're kind of like Big Brother, College Board, you know. So just be careful with that, especially like around when the test is. And if you have not joined into the Remind, hey Joe, how's it going? If you haven't joined into the Remind, make sure and do that, because I think it would be fun to do a Zoom party after we're all done and just celebrate being done. Let me see what the text thing is for the YouTube thing, just in case you guys aren't in here. If you're one of my students already, then that's fine. You already have like connection through Teams, but I know a lot of you don't have that. So I want to be able to add you guys in. I think a couple of you are already in, but just in case you're not, what you're going to do is text to 81010. Oops, I'm not even put this in here. All right, so you're going to text 81010, okay? And then you are going to put in the message box at YouTube 20, and that will get you into the YouTube thing. And then that way when I make a Zoom party celebration, you'll be able to get the link and get in there, because that would be fun. And it'd be super cool to see everybody, like to see everybody, you know, like we were talking about last night. So if you're not in the Remind, go ahead and get in the Remind. If you want to be a part of that Zoom call, we'll probably do it the day after the test and celebrate that we're done, at least until next year when you guys take, what's the, A-Push. Yep, that's the next one. Hey, Rachel, welcome in. I think you're already joined into the Remind, but if you're not, go ahead and do that. You text that number, and then the message is right below it in order to get in there. And then the day after the test, we're going to have a Zoom party to celebrate. So definitely get in there on that Remind so that you can get the link. Hey, Gary, how's it going? Gary, I'm not sure you're on the Remind yet. You might be. If you're not, there's info about it. You text 81010, and then the message is YouTube 20, and we'll be doing a Zoom celebration after the test. So if you want the link to the Zoom celebration, you have to be in the Remind. All right. Okay. So that's what that's for, Gary. I am not teaching A-Push next year, Wan Ying. However, I will definitely be around to help you. So don't worry about that. I'll definitely help you with that. Wan Ying says, yeah, you can also join through the Remind webpage. Yeah, absolutely. And the YouTube 20 is the code. Hey, Juan, welcome in. Happy to have you guys back. All right, so if you're just tuning in, 7 days left, guys. 7 days left. So we got to get rolling. We got to make sure that you guys understand this information. Yeah, Timmy, you can search Remind on Google and it'll come up. That would be fine too. Okay, so here's what we're doing tonight. Unit 3 and 4. Unit 3 is land-based empires. Unit 4 is maritime-based empires. And they really overlap quite a bit. So once again, I just threw them together so that you would just have all of your notes together. Typed, they're about 4 pages. So it's a little bit over the 1-pager that I was trying to do, but you might be able to narrow it down depending on what information you already know. Hey, Annie, welcome in. Good to see you. Gary says, Miss C, did you know that Rachel eats cereal with microwave milk? Huh, okay. Well, hey, each his own, Gary. Each his own. I'm sure you do some silly things, right? Good to see you, Annie. So glad to have you back. All right, so grab some notebook paper. If you want to type it, you can. However, it might be easier to have it like on paper when you're actually taking the test. If you have a printer at home, you could also type it and print it as well. So however works best for you, that's what I want you guys to do. Right, poor Rachel. Gary just is always getting on you. It's because he's salty over that game of Jeopardy, Rachel. That's what it's all about. All right, so we're going to get started, and I divided it once again. I put some context at the very beginning so that you can use this information for context if needed, and then outside information after that. Now, once again, you might be able to use any of this for whatever, but I just kind of divided it up for you a little bit so that when you get on the test, you'd have both those parts. All right, so let's get going. Context for land-based empires. First and foremost, though, you need to write down the time frame of this is 1450 to 1750. 1450 to 1750, this is unit 3 and 4. Land-based empires and maritime-based empires. Land-based, pretty simple, right? Based on land. Maritime would be water empires or empires that, you get to through ocean going. Maritime, right? All right, so let's get going. So context for land-based empires. This is when land-based empires reach their peak. So I would just like abbreviate land-based empires, put like LBE, reach peak. Make it as short and simple as you possibly can. Here are some of the land-based empires that we're going to be talking about. We have the Songhai or Songhai, and they are in West Africa. We have the Safavid. They are in Persia. The Mughals, India. Ottomans, Middle East. And we're going to be talking a little bit about Eastern Europe. Oh, no, sorry. Ottomans are in Middle East, Eastern Europe, as well as North Africa. So they're kind of spread out. Those are your land-based empires. So make sure you get that down. Now, another thing with land-based empires is they're multi-ethnic. There you go. Multi-ethnic. That's going to be important later on when imperialism happens and nationalism is starting to come into play. Definitely an important aspect there. Let's see. Land-based empires. Basically, they have political control over a large amount of land. Also, they control over land trade. And if I'm going too fast, just tell me to slow down in the comments. They expand with the help of gunpowder that comes from China. Specifically, these right here. These are the 3 specific gunpowder empires, but all of them are going to use gunpowder. These are just the 3 that are termed gunpowder empires. And remember that gunpowder comes from China. Overall, they have bureaucratic leaders. Remember, bureaucratic is just a fancy word for government. So overall, they have bureaucratic leaders that enforce the laws. Military for defense, of course. And in order to pay for it all, they tax the people. Yes, Gary, you're reading my mind. All right, now some key things here in this unit that you can also talk about in context is how they legitimize their power. And you could probably tell me some of these right off the top of your head because they're probably ingrained in your brain, right? So legitimize power through art, architecture, religion, and we'll talk specifics about those later on, but just make sure that you have this in context, because if your DBQ is about this time frame, then you could talk about this aspect. Okay, and then you can also put down that they declined in power around the 1700s because of increasing nationalism among all of the ethnic groups that they controlled. So they declined in power around the 1700s because of nationalism among the ethnic groups. Yes, Anani, Taj Mahal, we will definitely talk about that. It is a large grave. Yes, it was a tomb for his wife. Pretty amazing tomb. All right, let's move on to maritime-based empires. So what you can do is just make like another little bullet point or like a subheading, however you like to organize your notes. And then I usually like make a bullet point in from that. And maritime-based empires are made possible because of new technology. So put a bullet point under it that says new technology. We talked about this yesterday, the astrolabe, the magnetic compass. All this allows for further travel and exploration. Well, Gary, maybe become a millionaire and you could possibly have a tomb like that. Lou says, could you repeat how they legitimized? Sure. So we're going to talk about it more in detail in a little bit in the other part of this video, but they legitimized through art, religion, and architecture. Very good, Gary. Art, architecture, and religion, Anani. Awesome. This is still context one, but you could use it for outside evidence. We're going to put more of the details in outside evidence because for context, you just need some examples. So if you were going to write legitimize power in the context, you could put they legitimize their power through architecture. And one example of that is the Taj Mahal. And then you could talk about that a little bit. But usually if you see legitimized power through religion, architecture, and art, that prompts your brain to think of one. Hopefully. that's what we're hoping for. If not, then you can put an example in this area too. That's up to you. However you want to do it. I'm just trying to give you some things that will maybe spark that memory. All right, back with the maritime empires, we have the new technology. This allows it to happen. I was talking to a student today about context, and we were talking about how context sets the stage, right? So the new technology enables the maritime empires to actually happen. So that's an important part for context. Then we were talking about imperialism. Well, what's context for imperialism? Industrialization, right? Because if we didn't have industrialization, they wouldn't have needed raw materials. Therefore, they wouldn't have needed imperialism. So when you're trying to write the context, think about what leads up to that. What makes that event possible? And that's your context. Gary says, Himmler suggested using 2 to 3 vocab words and explaining them so gunpowder empires could be that. Yes, that's very true. Great suggestion. I did not watch that video yet, Gary, but I believe that he barely finished because I tried doing one in 45 minutes and it was very challenging for sure. I barely finished. I think I had like 3 minutes left on the clock. So it is hard, but here's the thing, guys. I don't want you guys going into this feeling like you're going to be defeated because they have already said that you don't necessarily have to get all 10 points in order to get a 5. So we don't know what the scale is yet. They're probably going to come up with that after we start grading them because they kind of are probably going to like base it on how well everybody does. And you're all in the same boat. Just about everybody in the United States, like you guys are all high school students. So you're about on the same level. It's not like there's going to be someone that's just going to be able to perform super amazing above and beyond everybody else. And that there's going to be this big group of people like that, right? So just calm down, stay focused, do your best. That's what you need to do. And that's true. Not everybody types fast, and that could be an issue. However, I have heard that there are less issues with copying and pasting it than there are with turning it in. So you might want to try practice typing. You can Google free typing programs. There are a ton out there on the internet, and you can practice before the big day. We have 7 days left. Oh my goodness. All right. Let's see. And you never, well, Gary, it's not going to be that low because here's the thing. You guys are going to be able to at least do context. You should have time to do your thesis. Outside evidence and explains, those are easy to do. So already that's 4, 5, 6, 6 points. I'm hoping 6 points will get you a 5, but we don't know yet. All right, Enemy says, this may be far-fetched, but for the rationales of imperialism, could it be okay to say those were similar to the rationales of exploration, such as La Mission Civil Trace? I'm not sure what Civil's Trace is, if that's right or not, like if it's spelled right. Let me know what you mean by that. But yeah, I mean, first of all, the rationale for both is money, right? So you could narrow it down to that and compare. Absolutely. Gary says 6 points is most likely going to be a 4 at least. I would hope so. I would hope that it would be a 4. And most colleges will take that. All right. So, you know, just do your best. That's what I expect of you. And I know that that's what you guys will try to do. All right. So let's go on. Underneath maritime-based empires, you need to put down Portuguese and Spanish. They are the ones that started off. So it starts with Portuguese and Spanish. Other European countries follow. Sure thing, Anthony. Anytime. Okay, and then you can just put down CC for Christopher Columbus, just to remember that he's part of this, right? Everybody knows that he discovered the New World. You don't need to put any notes about him in there. Just throw his name in there so that you know that it was the Portuguese and Spanish that started it. Christopher Columbus comes along, finds the New World. That'll spark your memory. Also put down a bullet point that says established trading posts in the Indian Ocean region. Established trading posts in the Indian Ocean region. Remember we talked about in the reading how the Portuguese had trading posts there and they were trying to control it. It didn't work out so well because they didn't have a big enough navy, but that's where that area was. Sure, Tammy, you could also put down Vasco da Gama, any of those early explorers, Pizarro, Cortez, all of those people had a hand in the New World. Gary says the Portuguese started making that trading post empire and started bringing Eastern goods, and all the others were like, we need some of that. That's right. Yeah, I like it. That's right. They need some of that. So supply and demand, right? They had the supply, and when they brought it back, there was a demand. That's what's important. Okay. Also put down during this time frame, transatlantic trade route will connect Europe, Africa, and America for the first time. So transatlantic trade route. If you already know what it connects, just write down transatlantic trade route. Bartholomew Diaz. Yes, you can put him in there as well, Juan. All of this stuff is good for context. It gives you some meat. Remember, though, you only want about 2 to 3 sentences, and then you want to make sure and connect this to your prompt. That's the important part. Another bullet point, desire for cash crops prompts the need for labor. The desire for cash crops prompts the need for labor. And then put in parentheses, slave trade. So the transatlantic trade route wanting would connect Europe, Africa, and America. I think that's what you're talking about. Yes, Luz, that's good too. You could talk about how the Ottoman cut off trade because they took over Constantinople. Absolutely. And that forces them to look for other routes, right? That's kind of what prompts the Portuguese and the Spanish to start exploring. So that's great for context. Definitely make a note of that as well. I think I have it in here some other place. but it would be great for context. You could put Columbian exchange. This is a part of maritime empires. It's a huge part of it. That's the transfer of foods. Examples would be potatoes, tomatoes, corn. Don't forget about the transfer of animals and diseases. Yes, Constantinople, Istanbul. Yep. Could you talk about coerced labor systems? Yes, Juan, absolutely. You could put hacienda, encomienda, and mita systems. Oh, look at all this stuff you guys are remembering. Yes, I am excited about this. Awesome. Very good. So hacienda, encomienda, and mita, all coerced. Yeah. Lou says, is transatlantic trade route the triangular trade? Yeah, it's basically the same thing. And let's see. Yeah, okay, I got all the questions. Okay, another thing that you could talk about here, I don't know if your teacher shared this with you or not, but it's a really cool theory. It's called the germs, guns, and steel theory. Does anybody know what I'm talking about? It has to do with a guy named Jared Diamond, and he wanted to know why the Europeans were able to dominate the world, basically. And if you're interested in this, it's the Germs, Guns, and Steel episode 2. It's on YouTube, I believe. At least the last time I checked, it was on YouTube. And it's super interesting theory about how, because the Europeans had better geography, they were able to have crops that gave them more nutrition, and that led them to be able to have more inventions going on. Yes, Gary. And yes, Jared Diamond, absolutely. My teacher would love to make fun of Jared. They made fun of him, huh? He's kind of a nerd, but I love the guy. He's just so cute. He's so fun. And I love that second episode. It really explains it well. But basically, because the Europeans had the advantage with geography, according to him and according to his theory, they were able to dominate the world. And it makes sense because they had domesticated animals, whereas the Native Americans did not. The only one that they had in the New World was the llama. You can't really pull a plow with a llama. They're not a beast of burden. And so that was a problem for the Native Americans. Therefore, when the domesticated animals come over to the New World, they bring diseases and kill a lot of the Native Americans because they didn't have immunity. So that would be a part of context that would be really good to explain if it goes with your topic. Okay, so Juan says, what's the difference between Columbian exchange and triangular trade? Columbian exchange is basically this exchange back and forth. So I'm going to say this is the New World or the Americas. Here's Florida and here's Texas. It's really bad. All right, here's Great Britain, and Spain kind of looks like this. And oh, I forgot the boot. There's Italy. Okay, so Columbian exchange is back and forth. Products from the old world going to the new world, all right? And then products coming from the new world and going to the old world. This has many causes and effects. For example, on the old world, it causes problems with the environment. It causes problems bringing disease. New foods are introduced. Honeybees are introduced, all right? When we're taking stuff over to the old world, that helps with the nutrition in the old world. The potatoes going over help the poorer people because potatoes were cheap to grow, all right? So that's the Columbian exchange. The triangular trade, is that the other one? I think that's the other one that you asked about. Triangular trade includes Africa. So Africa is down here, and this map is like totally not accurate, but work with me here, people. So triangular trade was getting raw materials from the new world, taking it over to the old world, manufacturing it, then taking manufactured goods down to Africa, trading some manufactured goods, getting slaves, and then taking manufactured goods and slaves over to the new world. Also, we have South America down here. A lot of the slaves went to Brazil as well. So that's the difference there in a nutshell with my awesome artistic ability. All right, let me make sure I didn't miss anything here. We talked about, okay, I think we only talked about his for population explosion, okay? I see, NNE. Gotcha. Well, if you're interested, watch the Germs, Guns, and Steel episode 2. It's interesting to me. I really think there's a lot of truth in it. And it would definitely be something that if it goes with your essay, it could potentially get you that complexity point. Gary says, and South Africa was somewhere around that same latitude, allowing for same conditions. Oh, yeah. So you're talking about Germs, Guns, and Steel. Yeah. That's episode 3. That's the one that talks about Africa. What are some examples of manufactured goods? Okay, so manufactured goods could be like cotton shirts because they're getting cotton from the New World. Doing things with sugar, like making molasses. And I can't think of any other ones right now. But guns, definitely guns, swords. Things that, because they don't have factories yet in the New World, that they can only do in the Old World. Okay, so welcome, Juan. No problem at all. Okay, so all of these events are going to lead up to and take place in this time frame, all right? And then eventually they're going to lead up to revolutions, which will happen in our next 2 units in 1750, which we'll talk about tomorrow. All right, so outside evidence, you can just, make like a little section that says outside evidence. Once again, you can use this for context too. We're just trying to give you a little bit of breaking point here. All right, so we're going to start with Europe. Europe in the 1500s was under monarchs or kings, and they were centralized governments. The whole time, they're also trying to keep power from the nobles. So the kings are trying to take the power back. Now remember, prior to this time frame, this could also be used for context, was feudalism and the Dark Ages, and we have the Black Death, and that kind of leads into the 1500s where there's more centralization going on, and the king's trying to take power back, okay? Now, let's narrow in on Russia. Russia is kind of like that odd man out. They're not really Europe. They're not really Asia. They're kind of stuck right in between. There's parts of it that's more like Asia. There's parts of it that are more like Europe. So Ivan the Terrible is in charge during this time. He expands Russia into Siberia because of the fur trade. How would you like to have a name like that? Ivan the Terrible. I mean, that's just crazy. But he wasn't that good. So, he lives up to his name. After his reign, then, Russia continues to expand to the Pacific. And they even send some explorers into Alaska. Here's a vocab word for you. The nobles in Russia are called boyars. And the peasants are called serfs. I can spell it right. Remember that serfs are bound to the land and they have very little freedom. Yeah, true, Gary. Then Peter the Great comes along and he's like, I don't want a name like that. I want a great name. How about Peter the Great? There is a new series coming out on Hulu on the 15th. What's the date today? The 13th. It's only 2 days away. It's about Catherine the Great, and I'm so excited. I hope it's good. She was quite a cool individual. She had a lot of interesting things happening around that time. Tammy said, my teacher just totally skipped Russia and Napoleon. Yeah, I mean, Russia, Napoleon, they're not huge in the curriculum, so I could see kind of skipping over it, but I love talking about it so much because I have a friend who lives in Russia, and actually I've been trying to get him to come on my YouTube channel as a guest speaker. He's a doctor over there, and he's really busy with the COVID stuff right now, so he hasn't been able to come on, but I'll try to get him to come on and talk to us this summer because he's super interesting. But I love Russia. I've been there, and it's just a cool, cool place. So definitely love Russian history. Can't skip over it. All right, so let's talk about Peter the Great. Peter the Great brings in reforms. And he tries to make Russia more like Europe. He does this because he traveled throughout Europe. He's very well educated. And he knows that Russia needs to be competitive with Europe and that currently they're not. Ooh, NNE. I'm gonna write that down. Letters to a King, huh? I have not seen that one. Actually, I'm gonna take a picture of it so I remember. Letters to the King. I'll check it out. I love medieval stuff. I was watching The Spanish Queen. It's on Stars, and I have it like for free for a couple months for a promo. And it's okay. It's not too bad. Okay, so back to Peter the Great. He builds schools and factories. He changes the standards of dress. We talked about that when we did the Unit 4 DBQ. He builds St. Petersburg and put a like LEG beside that. So you remember that building St. Petersburg is legitimizing his power through architecture. It's okay, NNE. No problem. I'll definitely check it out and keep you posted. So building St. Petersburg is a way to legitimize his power. And if you have time, look up some architecture of St. Petersburg. It's just absolutely amazing. The Winter Palace is enormous, and just you can tell that it's very European-esque. And he did several other palaces and just buildings, and it's really amazing. St. Petersburg is a beautiful city. The other thing that he wanted to do to kind of replicate Venice was make canals that go through the city, and it was kind of a wetland anyway, so it really worked well, except in the wintertime when the rivers are frozen. That doesn't work out so well. All right, also put down he encourages private industry, such as mining and making gunpowder. Yes, Luz, that's who Catherine the Great was. Yes, absolutely. I didn't say that she was like a good person because, of course, we side with the Cossacks, right? We side with the serfs because they're the underdog, but she definitely is an interesting person. And I'm curious to see how historically accurate it is. Sometimes they aren't great, but we'll see. Like there's one called Nightfall that I was watching, and basically none of it is accurate except for the very first battle of the Holy Crusades. It's in the video. Everything else is made up. It's just the battle that's accurate. I was like, dang it. I want it to be more historically accurate. Okay, back to Peter the Great. So he encourages private industry. He needs money, obviously, because he's building all this awesome stuff. And so he raises the taxes on the peasants. He will eventually put in what's called a head tax. And this oppresses the peasants even more. So it's definitely something that they're not excited about. Juan says it looks cool and rich. That sounds cool. I definitely want to check it out. Who was that super evil medieval guy? There were a lot of evil medieval guys. Are you talking about Henry VIII that like wanted to get divorced so that he could marry Anne Boleyn, and then pretty sure he beheaded Anne Boleyn. Are you talking about him? There was one queen that killed her husband and then stuffed him and kept his body like stuffed in her bedroom. I can't remember what her name was, but I thought that was kind of creepy. Guess she wanted to keep an eye on him. Okay, legitimizing power. Let's narrow in on that a little bit. So we know that in Europe, they use the divine right of kings. We talked about that a little bit yesterday. So put legitimized power, divine right of kings, just kind of put that together. What's the difference between the Henrys? They're different people. I don't really know all the Henrys in succession. We don't really get that in depth, but if your school offers AP European, that's where you'd learn more about them. All right. So England specifically had justices of peace. So put England, justices of peace. Their job was to maintain peace and carry out the king's law. Gary, I'm not sure who you're talking about, but that sounds scary. I'm with you, NNE. Totally with you on that. Also under England, put the English Bill of Rights. This requires Parliament to guarantee civil rights and to also oversee the laws that the king makes. So it kind of limits the king's power because he has to get the laws passed by the Parliament in order to actually place them into law. It's not an absolute monarchy anymore. Also, during this time frame, we have the Protestant Reformation. Protestant Reformation, Martin Luther. He wrote the 95 Theses. Remember, that's because he was upset about what the Catholic Church was doing. And two of those things that he's upset about, one is indulgences. That's where you paid off your sin in order to get to heaven. And then the other one, I want to make sure that I spell it right, is simony. And that was selling church offices. Oh, Invictus Vlad the Impaler. He's what Dracula is based on. Okay. Tammy, yeah. I don't think it was a constitutional monarchy yet. But it's very similar. I'm not sure if they technically called it that though. So I don't want to say yes, that's what they called it because I'm not positive. All right. So after the Protestant Reformation, one other thing that you can put down with Protestant Reformation was the reason that it was so successful was because of the Gutenberg printing press. So put down beside that Gutenberg printing press so that you remember that helps spread the word. Without that, it might not have been successful. Then, in response to this, we have the Counter-Reformation. The Counter-Reformation has the Inquisition in it, Lou, so you're getting very close. So the Counter-Reformation has the Council of Trent, and that's where the Catholics are trying to fix some of these problems. So Counter-Reformation, Council of Trent, and that's basically like a meeting to talk about what they can fix and what they can change. They're not going to change everything, but they're definitely going to try to fix things and get people to come back. And then they also have the Inquisition. They bring this back. They've used that in the past to root out unbelievers, but they're going to bring it back during this time. So basically, the Inquisition is where they would pull you in, like if you're suspected of not being a believer, or a heretic is often what they called them. If you're suspected of that, they would pull you in and torture you and get you to admit that you aren't a believer. It was an awful time frame. So if you're like someone who really believes in science, that was discouraged because that takes away from God, right? And so you might be pulled in as a heretic and tortured. Definitely not a good time frame to not be a believer. All right, and Juan says the Gutenberg printing press was from Unit 1 in China. Not the Gutenberg one, okay? So the Chinese made a different one. It was a wood block printing press. I think theirs was a wood block printing press. So yeah, that would be coming from China. And then it goes from China into Europe through the Middle East, and it's kind of like improved upon and becomes the Gutenberg printing press. Most of the things that the Europeans had were from China and the Middle East, and they just kind of improved upon them a little bit. Dustin said, I know you talked about outside evidence, but can you explain it more? Can it just be a minor detail in the essay that is from the time period, but not in the documents that it relates to the topics? Okay, yeah. So Dustin, yeah, it can be anything that relates to the topic. It can't be in the documents. If it's already been talked about in the documents, you can't repeat that same thing. So for instance, if the document talks about the Sepoy Rebellion, and it explains it, you can't explain it and count that as outside evidence because it told you that in the document, right? But if it left something out in the explanation, let's say if it talks about the Sepoy Rebellion and it says that it's because Muslims and Hindus didn't believe in having animal fat in their mouth. Like, let's say it talks about that. Then you could maybe add a detail about something else that happened during that time frame. But it can't be talked about in the documents. Also, it has to connect and relate to the topic. So you have to somehow connect that in your wording. You can't just throw in some random sentences. It has to connect. Let me know if that makes sense. NNE says, this is the age of scholasticism. Yeah, you mean when they start to study and start looking more into scientific stuff? Is that what you mean by that? Let me know. Lou says, weren't the Jesuits part of the Counter-Reformation? Gosh, these are some tough questions tonight, guys. I'm not sure. I don't know. I think so. I think the Jesuits were around during this time, but I can't remember if they were part of the Counter-Reformation. Check that out and let me know. Dustin says, so it doesn't exactly have to support your argument. That's a tough, tricky question. No, I wouldn't say that it has to support your argument. I don't think it does. Look at the rubric, but I'm pretty sure it doesn't have to support your argument. It just has to go with the topic. It has to be relevant. So, for example, if you're talking about the Columbian Exchange and you put outside evidence in there about imperialism, it's too far off base unless you've made a really good connection. You know what I'm saying? So, yeah, I don't think it has to support your argument though. Tammy says the Jesuits were part of the Protestant. That could be. They were another group in the Protestants. Yeah. Jesuits spread religion by creating schools when they did the scramble in Africa. Yes, that part is true. Tammy says Henry VIII was the Anglicans and the Calvinists. Yeah, so we also had that too. And then was this the period, the peak of religion and education, or the decline of it to humanism? So it's starting to go away from religion towards humanism when we get towards the Renaissance. Okay, so the Renaissance will come after this stuff. So yeah, it would be the decline of education into humanism. Good. You guys are asking some really good questions tonight. I think y'all are ready. I'm excited. Okay, so also under England, we have the 30 Years' War. This is fought between the Catholics and the Protestants. It destroys the economy, causes famine and starvation. And in the end, every place was kind of allowed to pick their own religion. Every region. So in the end, every region was allowed to pick their own religion. For example, France, Spain, and Italy picked Catholic. Northern Europe, Lutheran or Calvinist. And England was Protestant. Well, Gary, yeah, I think you're right a little bit too, because it's going to relate to your argument if it's relating to the topic. It just may not support your argument. And I think that's what Daniel was asking. Can it just be something that is related to the topic? And yes, it can be anything that's related to the topic. It doesn't necessarily have to be a part of your argument. If it can be a part of your argument, then that's great. But as long as it's relevant to the topic, that's what they're looking for. So 100 Years' War won. It devastated Europe, and it ends, and everyone can choose their own religion. Like each region can decide their religion. So, for example, France, Spain, and Italy, they choose to be Catholic. And Northern Europe, Lutheran or Calvinist. And then we also have England chooses to be Protestant. Juan, the French and Indian War is the same as the 7 Years' War, different than the 100 Years' War. I think that's what you're asking. Okay, then we have France. In France, the king has ultimate power. So remember, we had in England the English Bill of Rights and Parliament. France, total control by the monarchy. So absolute power in France. Also, to collect taxes, they have what's called tax farmers. Yes, the word absolutionism, absolutely. Absolute power. Louis the 14th, Louis the 15th, all the Louis. Except for Louis Vuitton, not him. All right, and then an example of legitimizing power. So I would just like abbreviate it and put Louis the 14th. You can write it in Roman numerals if you want. Builds Versailles. This was a way he legitimized his power. Versailles is huge, huge. Yes, we're talking about France right now, Wan Ying. Absolutely. So usually when you're on the DBQ and you're talking about outside evidence or you're talking about context, you need an example. So that's why I'm trying to give you examples as we're going through this. All right, make a new heading that says technology coming to Europe. Technology coming to Europe. Remember, we talked about how it's coming from China and the Middle East. So put down coming from Muslim world and Asian world, or China and the Middle East, however you want to word it. Tammy, there's a really cool 3D tour of Versailles right now. If you Google 3D tour of Versailles, you can find it, and it's pretty cool. It's awesome. I've been there a couple summers ago, and it was really packed and really busy, and you almost couldn't enjoy it because there was just too many people, and it just felt so crowded, and it was hot, and I wasn't like super excited going in because you just couldn't see it with these mobs of people. But the 3D tour is really cool because it's empty and you can see like all the details and stuff. Still definitely go, 100%. I suggest going. But in the meantime, you can do the 3D tour. All right, so we have all this technology coming. So it's coming through, you can put down in parentheses the Mongols and the Moors in Spain. This is how you spell Moors. These would be the Muslims in Spain. Tech coming to Europe, enemy, not from. Tech going into Europe. All right, so here's some examples. New star charts, which would chart the sky at night so that you could travel at night on the ocean easier. Cartography. I'll make sure and spell that right. There we go. Yeah. This would be the art of map making. You can put Henry the Navigator beside this. Okay, he was really big into map making. Wind patterns. They start figuring out wind patterns. Our favorite one, the astrolabe. That one is going to be fun. I hope you guys get to throw that one in there because, I mean, astrolabe is just something that we all know, right? That's ingrained in our brain. The magnetic compass, you can also put down the stern rudder and lateen sails. That's how you spell that, lateen sails. All these things are coming into Europe, making improvements. We have faster ships, and here are some examples. Make sure and spell them right because some of these are funky. Oh, yeah. So faster ships, better travel on the sea. And then we have the Renaissance, which just increases this thinking and this new technology and the scientific revolution. All of that stuff is like just increasing. So you can put down something about like the Renaissance increases humanistic way of thinking. We talked about it a little bit yesterday with the Ninja Turtles. That's a good way to remember some of the artists. Gary says, is anyone going to talk about how lucky Japan has been throughout its history? The Mongols could invade because of the storm. True. China didn't control due to the sea. Never got colonized. They could have, though, if they wouldn't have done the Meiji Restoration. The only Asian country to industrialize after World War II, USA would help them out and they would become top economic power. Good point, Gary. Good point. They were always at the right place at the right time. That's important. All right, so let's talk about exploration and some causes and effects. So put down a topic that says causes and effects of exploration. Causes and effects of exploration. We're rolling right along tonight, guys. It's exciting. Super exciting. Okay, so here's some causes and effects. The Muslims take over Constantinople. They control that trade route or that area for trade. So this would definitely be a cause of exploration, like Luz mentioned before. Muslims taking over Constantinople and controlling that aspect of trade. Now the Europeans have to look for a new way. This is Unit 3 and 4, Luz. I've lumped them together because Unit 3 and Unit 4 I felt were super confusing because they kind of keep bouncing back and forth between all the empires. So I put all the empires together and put the topics together so that it wouldn't be like bouncing back and forth. Because it was confusing me. And if it was confusing me, I was like, this is probably going to confuse some of the students. Except for Gary, right? Gary would have gotten it because he's awesome. Anyway. Right, Rachel? Gary and Rachel love each other. If you guys end up getting married, like, I definitely want to come to the wedding, okay? Yeah, he got it completely fine. They are not, they're the same time period. Yes, that's for sure. They are the same time period. But they're like land-based, maritime, you know, they're separate. I don't know. I don't get the new curriculum just drives me crazy. Anyway, let's not sidetrack. All right, so the next bullet point that you're going to put down, Portuguese started exploring around the 1400s. And we have Henry the Navigator. We have Diaz sailing around the Cape of Good Hope. Here's how you spell that. Diaz. We have Da Gama going to India. And then the trading post in India. Rachel, thank you for inviting me. Gary says, heck no, she thinks that Michael Jordan is better looking than Chris Hemsworth. What? Gary, why would you care about that? I don't understand why you care about that. Like, let her like who she likes. I mean, as long as she likes you, right? Dustin says, wasn't it the Ottomans that took over Constantinople? Yes, so it was the Ottomans, but the Ottomans were Muslims. And that was a problem because Europeans were Christians and they didn't get along with the Muslims. And so they didn't want to have to go through there to trade. Oh, Chris Helmsworth is king, Gary says. Oh, okay. Okay, Gary. Duly noted. Duly noted. All right, let's go on. So we have the Dutch are also building trading posts. You could put that down. Dutch are building trading posts. Spanish, French, and England start looking towards the New World because they're looking towards an alternate route. Now, at the time, they didn't know that the New World existed, but they thought that going that direction would get them to India. It doesn't, but... Gary, no judgment, dude. No judgment. Yeah, I know what you meant. I'm just teasing you. Okay, so also put down one of the effects of this exploration, the conquering of the Aztec and the Mayan. The conquering of the Aztec and the Mayan. Listen, Gary, you might as well know that in a world of women, all right, when we band together, it always backfires on you guys. Always, okay? Always. Just learn your lesson now. It'll be easier for a life lesson. I should do a series called Life Lessons with Miss Z. That could be one of them. All right. Also, one of the effects, Columbian Exchange. We already talked about a lot of information on that earlier, so just throw it in there. Columbian Exchange. You know off the top of your head that sparks an effect. Another effect, triangular trade. Talked about this earlier too, so you should already know what it is, but basically manufactured goods coming from Europe, going to Africa, dropping some of the manufactured goods off, picking up slaves, going to the New World, mostly Brazil and the Caribbean is where they dropped off slaves. Some go to the Americas, and then getting raw materials from the New World, taking it back over to manufacture in the Old World. So you could draw a little chart like that if you wanted to real quick. And just, that would spur your brain that, hey, this is kind of the direction that they're going. Remember, manufactured goods in Europe, slaves getting picked up in Africa, and raw materials in the New World. Make these notes work for you, people. That's the key. All right. Also, one of the effects is the African diaspora. We talked about diaspora yesterday, so you should remember that word. Oops, gotta spell it right. African diaspora. Diaspora is just the spreading out. So Africans coming over to the New World, that's the African diaspora. They're bringing with them foods such as rice and okra. They also bring with them their language, and it creates syncretic languages, another one of our vocab words. One example of a syncretic language is Creole. If you've ever been to New Orleans, there's a lot of Creole stuff going on there. Yeah, Atlantic triangular trade is the same as triangular trade. It is different than the Columbian Exchange, though. Columbian Exchange would just be the exchange of goods back and forth, whereas triangular trade is the triangle. Okay, let's see. Then we have indentured servants coming to the New World. Put that down as an effect. Indentured servants coming. Dustin says, do you have any idea how long the documents will be? I do not, Dustin. I'm hoping that they don't kill you guys with long documents, but they have not said anything. And Juan, Swahili is definitely a syncretic language. That will be in Eastern Africa, so Zimbabwe. And I think that's in here at some point. Enemy, I hope they're short, not too long. Yeah, me too. The only problem with them being really short is that it's hard to use them sometimes because they don't have as much information. So you don't want them to all be really short, but you don't want them to all be really long either. We just need a balance. The language spoken in the Carolinas, starts with a G, and it's not, I can't think of it right now, but I know what you're talking about, and that is definitely another syncretic language. Google that real quick because it's like right on the top of my head and I can't think of it. All right, so Spanish in America, they have some labor systems, and somebody mentioned them before. We're going to put those down here. The Spanish labor systems are encomienda, hacienda, and they also use the mita system, which was from the Incas. These are all coerced labor systems. Gula, that's it. Yes, Isabella, absolutely. Gula. Perfect. Yep. That is a syncretic religion or language. Gary says, really short ones don't allow for a lot of interpretation. Yeah, so you're right. But we need balance. Very good, Isabella. Oh, Gary, calm down. Calm down. We know you want to be Chris Helmsworth. Just focus on that. Okay. So encomienda system. This one is very brutal. They're all pretty brutal, but the encomienda system was the one that was described as the most brutal. And that's where they use indigenous people to work. Hacienda system also uses indigenous people, as well as the mita system. So you could just put indigenous down beside this. Remember, indigenous means natives. So it's just a fancy word for natives. The College Board loves using these fancy words because they try to throw y'all off, but you guys are going to know that word. So they ain't going to be able to throw you off. You know it. Okay, and then also during the 1500s, we have them mining silver. So put down the silver trade. This is with the Spanish. And they're going to be mining silver in Peru and Mexico. And I think we talked about this yesterday. It ends up going to the Philippines on the Spanish galleons, which are the big ships, the big treasure ships. And then on to China. The silver trade will definitely affect the Spanish colony or the Spanish economy and the Chinese economy as well. Eventually, it will cause inflation in both places, but it works out with them for a while. Perfectly balanced as all things should be. Yes, Gary, I like that. That's exactly what we're hoping for. And then he says, wasn't one of the systems stopped because of how cruel it was? I think eventually they were all outlawed, but I can't remember which one. Mercantilism, yeah, we'll get into mercantilism in just a little bit. Yes, Potosi, really large silver mine. Yep, awesome. Look at that. That would be great outside evidence too. And you got that hopefully from your brain, unless you just Googled it. Okay, but I think you got it from your brain. All right, also, we have a change. This is an important change in the New World that happens because of the Spanish. So it's a change in social classes. And it might be helpful to know these just in case. So this is social classes in Latin America. We have the Peninsulars. And I did not pronounce that right, I'm sure. These are the elite. They're the ones that are going to be born in Spain or on the Iberian Peninsula. Criollos were the Europeans born in America. Mestizos, I gotta spell that right. Mestizos are Europeans mixed with natives. Mulattoes, I think that's 2 T's, yep, are Europeans and Africans. And then Zambos are natives and Africans. So those would be the social classes in Latin America. Yes, Luz. Manila would be in the Philippines, and that was important. That is where the Spanish galleons would stop and trade. Very good. Man, Gary, you are so humble. Rachel, he's just the most humble guy, isn't he? He's just so humble. Don't worry, though. Rachel will knock that humbleness right out of you. Right, Rachel? All right. Gary says, microwave melt person. Hey, you better not knock it before you try it. You might like it. Where was this system? This is Latin America. And it's brought on by the Spanish. And then he says, would it be okay if we also listed viceroys since they were like the rulers of New Spain? Yeah, absolutely. Gary says, thank you. I'm so humble that instead of showering with diamonds, I shower in gold to save money. Aw, Gary, that's so sweet. Send some of that gold and diamonds my way, will you? I'd like to just, go on vacation every once in a while. All right. Mercantilism. That's the next thing we're going to talk about. Mercantilism was mentioned earlier. This is definitely a change that you want to keep in mind. Here's how you spell it. Mercantilism. And this is basically exporting more than you import so you can keep the money in your country. Uh-oh, Gary, you're making Rachel laugh. You know that's trouble. That's how you win a girl's heart right there. Just saying. Okay, so mercantilism, keeping the wealth in the country. This was the new concept that comes around during this time. They want to export more than they import. We also have demographic changes happening. Africa has more women taking leadership roles because the men are being taken. Another change comes about in the 1600s, and that is the joint stock companies. I think we put that in the last unit, maybe two. We talked about that a little bit. Joint stock companies are where they share liability. So everyone chips in. And then if there's a loss, they all share in that together. And if there's a big win, they all share it. So that you're not losing your entire life savings if the deal would go wrong. So that's another part of it too. Yes, mercantilism is trading with the mother country as well. Because here's the thing. The mother country looks at the colonies as their country. So they're bringing in those raw materials, and then they're only allowing the colonies to get those exports from the mother country. So yeah, that's a part of it too. I forgot to mention that. Okay, and then another change, we also have some syncretic beliefs, and one of them is voodoo. We have Santeria. And then I think somebody mentioned the Virgin of Guadalupe earlier. That would definitely be under syncretic. So these are all changes that are occurring because of these causes and effects. Okay. Let's go on to East Asia. What's East Asia doing during this time? So in East Asia, we have the Yuan dynasty that is overthrown by the Ming dynasty. So the Mongols are out, the Ming come in. The Ming expand China. They also have problems with the Mongols, so they fix the Great Wall and they expand that. So I would just put something about, they use the Great Wall to defend against the Mongols. Make it as short as you possibly can. They centralize their power. Get rid of Yuan dynasty policies. They get rid of the Yuan dynasty policies. and they bring back the civil service exam. They also are going to limit contact with the outside world. After the voyages of, and I always pronounce his name wrong. Wang Ying, tell me again, because I always pronounce it wrong. But after these voyages, I want to make sure I pronounce his name right. Then they start to isolate themselves. No more outside world trade. After the Ming, we have the Qing dynasty. This one is also ruled by outsiders, the Manchu. Yes, there it is. So it's huh at the end instead of he. Huh. I got to remember that. Yes, and Dowager Shishi, I think that one's hard to pronounce too. She is really cool. I was reading a book on her, and she was actually like the mother of she was the lowest concubine, I think, and then she had a son, and she was moved up right underneath the queen mother. Just amazing story. And then she eventually takes over the throne. She was awesome. She didn't like outsiders, though. That's for sure. All right, so the Qing dynasty, they rule until 1911. During this dynasty is when we have the Opium Wars, so put Opium Wars underneath that. Remember, those are the wars because the British wanted to come in and trade opium, and the Chinese were trying to keep them out, and then they end up losing these wars. And let's see. Also put down that they discriminate against the Han. The Han are actually Chinese. Manchu are outsiders. So they come in and they discriminate against them. They also centralize power through force. They centralize power through force and putting down rebellions. Centralize power through force and putting down rebellions. They legitimize power through art. They have these grand portraits of the emperors that makes the emperors look really amazing. Okay, let's talk about Japan for a minute. So Japan is under the rule of the shogun. Japan is under the rule of the shogun. And under the shogun, we have the daimyos. And under them, the samurai. So what's this called? You got it, a feudalism. That's right. We talked about this a little bit yesterday. So the samurai basically are like the knights, and the daimyos are like the nobles. Eventually, the daimyos are going to start getting some of this power. So they have a conflict between them and the shoguns. And eventually, 3 daimyos unify Japan. They use gunpowder to do this, and they overthrow the shogun. And they make the Tokugawa shogunate. I want to make sure that I'm spelling this right. Yeah, Tokugawa. Tokugawa shogunate. And that will centralize the control under the feudal system. Yes, Tammy. You could also put Boxer and Taiping Rebellion. That would be good to add. Opium War is talked about in Unit 5, but I just thought it would be good to mention it because it happens during the Qing Dynasty. Once again, like I said, the curriculum is like crazy and it's scattered all over because they're doing it more thematically, but I just figured I'd mention it. If you guys already know what Opium Wars are, then that's great. Like you can use it really in whatever time frame if you're talking about the Qing Dynasty, I guess. You know what I'm saying? All right, this is a multi-pager. Yes, Wang Ying, I'm sorry. I tried to limit it. It's actually like 2 pages per unit when I typed it. But so it's a 2-pager or a 1-pager front and back if you typed it. Yes, Tokugawa shogunate is still feudal. All right, so what happens under that then, once they centralize their control, it reduces the power of individual daimyos, okay? So they kind of like control all the daimyos. Gary says, he's on 3 pages, get on his level. That's funny. What is one of the emperors of Japan? Luz, there are a couple of them in there. See if it's on your notes that Miss Garza gave you. I think it's on there because I'm not sure how to spell their names and I don't want to botch them. Rachel says it's better than my long notes though. Yeah, absolutely. So that's the purpose of this, right? To just be able to spark your memory so that you can write this stuff quickly. Gary says, oh, by the way, Misty, there is a movie about Christians within the Tokugawa. Oh, yeah. I saw that. The guys that are like, they're kind of, are they tortured or like held prisoners? I think I've seen some of that. I don't know if I've seen the whole thing though. Okay, let's move on to gunpowder empires. We're almost done with this page and then we just got half a page left. Okay, exciting. Oh my goodness, we've already been going an hour and 15 minutes. You guys are champs. Okay, so gunpowder empires. The first one is the Ottoman Empire. The Ottoman Empire. And one of the notable guys there is Mehmed the Second. He's the one that takes over Constantinople and changes the name to Istanbul. He also expands into the Black Sea and the Balkan area. Yes, The Last Samurai. That's really good. I've not seen Samurai Jack. I'll have to check that out. Wan Ying, go grab some food and come back, girl. You're a trooper. You can eat while we're talking. Go for it. We can't see you. We don't know. I usually eat before the live, and then I like get a snack later because I don't eat a lot before the live. But anyway, okay. So we got Mehmed, and he is also centralizing the power through the Devshirme system. All right, so put down a bullet point for the Devshirme system. And we talked a lot about this in my videos when we were doing this unit. So hopefully you guys already know what that means. But basically, this is when they went to go and round up Christian boys, and then they made them become janissaries. Janissaries, or soldiers. Some of them had government jobs, but some of them also became janissaries. The janissaries will eventually get really powerful, and then the Sultan kills them all. That's the long and short of their story. Also, we have Solomon the First. Put down his name, Solomon the First. He expands even more. That's spelled right? No. E-I. He will legitimize power through architecture and art, specifically in Constantinople or Istanbul, Hagia Sophia. Remember the church that was turned into the mosque? That is one of the ways that they legitimize power. Let's see. Wan Ying says, I got to take notes. Okay, Wan Ying, because I got nothing else to do. Here it says, Gary, you need to be studying. That's what you need to be doing. Yeah, I'm sad that we skipped over the old history too. But, you know, even when we taught it, we didn't teach very much of it because there's just too much to teach. It's too much. All right, decline of the Ottoman Empire. After Suleiman, the sultans were very weak. They had problems with the European neighbors that were very strong. So problems with the Europeans. Overtaxation of the peasants. And nationalism is causing ethnic groups to want independence. So overtaxation and nationalism. Rachel, if he's spending his whole day doing DBQs, it's just to impress you. That's what he's trying to do. We should have another branch of AP World. Yes, we definitely should. That would be a good idea. And Garrett, be nice to Rachel. Come on now. Oh, you guys are too funny. All right, so Safavid Empire. We have in Safavid Empire, they expand with a strong military. Yes, Tammy, you can put sick man of Europe down for the Ottoman Empire. Absolutely. Juan says, the reason I took AP World is because I wanted to learn about the Holocaust, and I wasn't able to do that. Oh, dang it, Juan. Well, you know, I have a video called Genocides that I did for world history, but it's the same information. So you can check that out, and you'll learn a little bit about the Holocaust. And after the AP test, I think I'm going to do videos on the units that we missed. So keep an eye out for that. We'll talk about it. But the Holocaust is definitely very interesting. I like to learn about why and how Hitler was able to make people do what he made them do. I mean, it's just fascinating how good he was at mind control. And that's the part that I really find interesting. But yeah, I'm really sad that we couldn't talk about that. And I also really like talking about the Cold War and Mao. Mao's is super interesting. So I'll make some videos about it. Of course, it's not going to be the same as being in class, but maybe I can find some like special guests to come on, or some time machine characters. Wan Ying knows what I'm talking about. Maybe the rest of you can find out. Okay, Gary says you can still do that. Yeah, he can still do that for sure. And there are some very good Holocaust museums. I'm not sure if there's one out in California, but there might be one in LA. That would be a good idea. Gary went through the rest of the units. Okay, not a bad idea. Isabella says he was very persuasive. Yeah, he definitely was very persuasive. It was psychology at its finest. Absolutely, yeah. It's so crazy. It's just so crazy. There's a book called Ordinary Men, and yeah, I think that's what it's called, Ordinary Men. And if you get a chance this summer to read it, it's interesting because it talks about the killing squads that they sent out to these Jewish towns and just rounded hundreds of people up and killed them. And these were ordinary men that were doing this. And it talks about the psychology of why they did it. And it's a very interesting book. So Juan, you might want to check that one out. All right, we got to get back to this, guys. Juan Ying's got to go eat. Okay, so let's see. Safavid. Shah Abbas. He's important in the Safavid dynasty. Shah Abbas. And he also will use Christian boys in the military. He imports weapons from Europe. And he unifies under the Shia religion, the Shia branch of Islam. Also important to note, the Safavid and the Ottoman do not get along. So Ottoman are Sunnis, which is a different branch than Shia. So they do not get along. Make sure and make a note of that. Safavid women are veiled and restricted, but they are allowed to participate in some aspects of society. So they're restricted, but allowed to participate some. They can sometimes get a divorce. Then we have the decline of the Safavid. Basically, all the leaders that follow Shah Abbas were not very good. They spent too much and they weakened the economy. Afghan forces came in. Eventually, the Ottoman and Russians will also come in and take the area. They kind of split it up. And that's the end of the Safavid dynasty. Then we have the Mughals. This is in India. And their best ruler was Akbar. Something to remember about him is he is religiously tolerant. He is very good at managing the economy and trade. He does try to blend Hindu and Islam together into like a syncretic religion, but it's not very popular. He, of course, all of India at this time, all of the Mughal Empire is under a caste system. We talked about this a little bit yesterday. There's no social mobility. You have the different levels that you're born into, and outside of the caste system are the untouchables. They're below the bottom. So how did Akbar consolidate his power? He had fair laws, good government. He used tax collectors called zamindars. They would collect tax and also build, like do building projects. Later, though, they will become corrupt. Then we also have Shah Jahan. He was mentioned earlier. He builds the Taj Mahal. Put Taj Mahal and then put right beside it the LED power. This is how he legitimizes his power with the Taj Mahal, which was the tomb for his wife, how Gary said earlier. And then you're right, this guy that you guys were talking about in the comments, Aurangzeb, I'm sure I'm butchering his name. He is the opposite of Akbar. He comes in and he switches everything. And this is when the Mughal Empire starts to decline. So he basically comes in and he tries to take everything under Muslim rule. He runs out of money because of overexpansion. He couldn't defeat the peasant revolts. And after his death, the British and French come in. Okay, almost done, guys. All right, the next part we have empires that practice tolerance versus intolerance. So put empires that practice tolerance. One example would be Akbar. The Ottoman had the jizya tax, or the jizya. I think this was for non-Muslims. So they were tolerant as long as you paid that tax. And then, of course, intolerance would be the Aurangzeb. And he's in the Mughal. The Safavids only want Shia, so put Safavids, Shia. The Inquisition in the Catholic Church would have been an example of that. And the Manchu discriminating against the Han Chinese. And one last topic, internal and external challenges to state power. I would have to look that up, Gary. I'm not sure. All right, internal and external challenges to state power. In the New World, we have what's called Metacom's War. And this is the Wampanoag Native Americans against the colonists. Let me spell Wampanoag for you. I think that's such a cool word. Wampanoag. I had a professor in college. She loved to tell this story and talk about this tribe because the names are so cool. So they lost to the English colonists. The first example of intolerance was Aurangzeb. It's up in the comments. It's spelled like this. Aurangzeb. He's the first example. He's the one in the Mughal Empire that wanted to take them back to Islam. All right, and then we have Queen Nzinga. She was the African queen who revolts against the Portuguese. She flees with her people and starts Mantamba. So these would be, I would say that Metacom's war would be an external because it's in the colonies and it's a challenge to the state power of Britain. And then, but you know, they could be internal. You know, I didn't really like differentiate what was internal and external in the book. I could see this being like external because it's not in Britain, but it's a British colony. So I would probably say these would be external. Internal, I think, would be like in Great Britain or in Portugal, whereas these are in the colonies. So that's what I would go with. That's what I would argue. Wasn't she lied to? Yeah, so she was allies with the Portuguese. She got baptized as a Christian. Their alliance did not work out, so she leaves and starts a new country, basically, in Matamba. All right, and then one last one. Somebody mentioned it earlier, the Pugachev Rebellion. This is the one in Russia. The peasants rebelled, and Catherine the Great shut it down. Now, we already listed most of these changes earlier, but one thing I want you to know real quick is remember with change, if you are talking about a change, you have to talk about what it's like before the change and what it's like after the change. So some of the changes were Columbian exchange, trade, travel, let's see, what else? Joint stock company, mercantilism. So if you are talking about any of these, you have to make sure and talk about the fact that before the Columbian exchange, the old world didn't have potatoes and cheap foods, so their nutrition was a little bit different. And after the Columbian exchange, they had that. Now poor people can grow these crops and benefit from them. You could also talk about the domesticated animals and what an impact they had on the New World. But you can't just mention the Columbian exchange was a change and it brought domesticated animals to the New World, which brought diseases. That's not enough. You have to talk about the fact that they weren't there before, that the only one that they had was the llama, and they didn't have immunity to the diseases. So do you see the difference? Talk about what it's like before the change and after. That's super important. You won't get the points unless you do both. Then one continuity during this time frame that you could argue would be the slave trade. That pretty much is going on during this whole time, or coarse labor. You could talk about that as well. And you could talk about how it's used in the silver mines, and then later on in the plantations. So for continuity, of course, that's one that just continues. Change, though, in order to show change, you have to talk about before and after. So make sure that you remember that. All right, Rachel says, would Protestant Reformation be internal? Yes, that would be internal. That could also count as a change, too. Both. Rachel says, what was the economy before mercantilism? So before mercantilism, they didn't have colonies. So you would just say that, like, this was This was a new change to their economy because now they want to make sure, the whole point of mercantilism was to make sure that their colonies only bought from them so that they would make the most profits. Okay. And before mercantilism, they wouldn't have had that opportunity. So you could just say, before mercantilism, they didn't have colonies. And so whatever raw materials they had in their country was what they had access to. Now they have access to all kinds of raw materials. They also have this economic control over the colonies, and they want the colonies to only buy from them. What was the government before? Which government? What are you talking about? Be a little bit more specific. Gary says, same with change in continuity. Same with change in continuity? Not sure what you want to say with that either. Lou says, was it feudalism? Okay, so before what? So feudalism is still feudalism dies out after the plague, but we still have the king in charge. So after the Black Death, the peasants have a little bit more power. We have, things coming in like the English Bill of Rights, and but the king is still like in power. It's not technically feudalism, but we still have some of those old ways, I guess you could say. Gary says, how would you add what was going on before, though? Where would you put it? Well, it depends. So if the DBQ is talking about change, so let's say that the question is, evaluate the extent to which the Columbian Exchange changed the new and the old world. Let's say that's your prompt. So if one document talks about domesticated animals, and you're going to do that as a part of your thesis, in your topic sentence, you would talk about how domesticated animals being brought to the new world changed the environment and it brought diseases. Maybe those are the two things you're going to focus on. So then in that paragraph, you would talk about what it was like before. You'd say something like, before the Europeans came, the only domesticated animal that the Native Americans had was the llama. Therefore, they didn't have the diseases that the Europeans had because they didn't have the domesticated animals. When the Europeans brought domesticated animals, the Native Americans didn't have the immunity to those diseases, and that's why so many of them died. Okay, something like that. Of course, using the documents with that, okay? But you need to explain and understand that you know what it was like before. That shows change. Okay, was the economy before, what was the economy before the trade routes? Oh, okay, Luz, I think I know what you're talking about. So before money economies, we had bartering. So if you're talking about a money economy, if you're talking about capitalism, or you're talking about trade routes building states and you're trying to show change, then you would talk about bartering and how it goes from bartering to more of a money economy. Hey, how's it going? Tasneem? I can't say your name. I'm so sorry. Tasneem, I think, right? Tasneem. Let me know if I said it right. Isabella says it changes from manorial system to mercantilism. Yeah, so manorial system definitely would have been the old way, the old economy, where, remember, they're all on the manor. Very good point. I forgot to include that. Good point, Isabella. Okay, Gary says, so just put it somewhere within the body. Yeah. And most of the time, your documents will probably allude to that. But just make sure that you're talking about the before and after, because that technically shows change. All right, Wan Ying, if you're ready to go eat, you are free to go, my dear. Thank you so much for joining. That's all I've got for these units. I'll take the last couple questions. Let's see. We got Dustin says, not all prompts clearly state the line of reasoning. What words or phrases help us know what line of reasoning we should use? That is a very good question, Dustin. So if it doesn't state the line of reasoning, what I would suggest is just go with what feels right. Like, for instance, some of the DBQs that we've already done that are on the lives allude towards cause and effects, or they lean towards that. And if you don't know, Bai Wan Ying, thanks for joining us. If you don't know, then start reading the documents. And usually once you start reading the documents, you'll figure it out, and you'll be able to piece something together, okay? That would be my advice to you. Just make sure, look in the prompts, see if you can figure it out. And if not, just start reading the documents. Because the thing is that if you put it in that context of like compare and contrast and cause and effect or changing continuity, that helps you get the complexity point. But if you get all the other 9 points, I'm pretty sure 9 out of 10 will be a 5. I don't think that they're going to make you have a 10 out of 10 to get a 5. Could be wrong because we don't know yet, but I'm pretty sure that's not going to be the case. So if you miss that complexity point, like, it's not a super big deal. So it's super important, though, that you try to get all the other points. And if you can't figure that out, then don't get hung up on it. But try your best, and then it might help you write it as well. Yep, that's right. Your classes are really helpful. That's why I always join it. Well, thank you. I appreciate the support. I definitely love having you guys here. If you are just logging on or you weren't here at the very beginning, if you scroll all the way to the top of the comments, I could probably put it down here again. We are going to have a celebration, a Zoom party at the end of all this. I'll probably do it on the 22nd. Oh, it's not up there anymore. But in order to get the link, you need to be a part of our remind. So if you text 8180, hold on, let me look it up. You can be a part of our YouTube party because I want to celebrate. And I thought it would be fun to actually see y'all's faces on Zoom because some of you I don't know yet. So I thought that would be really cool. So you text to that number and then you put the message in here, and the message, the message should be, I should have just written this on the board. Duh. The message should be at YouTube 20. And that's how you can join the YouTube, and then I'll send out the link when that gets closer. Okay, let's see. Invictus he says, if 9 out of 10 isn't a 5, then I will cry. Well, it's gotta be. I mean, it's gotta be, right? I totally agree. 90% of people probably won't get the complexity, though we have to discard going. No one is going for that anyway. I mean, the complexity is like really complex, right? It's really hard to get. And sometimes I think that, this should be YouTube. Sorry, I spelled that wrong. If you're joining the YouTube thing, this is what you message right there. I think that oftentimes the complexity point, you just kind of fall into it because of having a really great essay. So I wouldn't stress about that one. All right, does anybody have any other questions real quick? Tomorrow we will be meeting again at 7 to go over units 5 and 6. And then Friday, don't forget, Friday noon Central Time, we're going to be playing Jeopardy against my friend Mr. Stopberg and all of his kids, and we got to win it because I've been talking all kinds of smack all week telling him that we're going to win, all right? So y'all need to show up and show out. That's 12 on Friday. Big Jeopardy competition. I hope you all can join. Remember, it's Central Time. Unit 6 DBQ will be next week on May 19th. As soon as I get that typed up, I will send out a link in the remind so that you guys can practice it beforehand if you would like. I have not typed that up yet, though, but I will get to it. All right, Rachel's ready. She is so ready, Gary. Like, she is ready for Jeopardy. Are you ready for Jeopardy? You bring in your A game? I know you guys are really competitive with that Jeopardy, so. All right, and then next Monday and Tuesday, actually Tuesday, that's when we normally play Jeopardy. I don't have a Jeopardy game for that day because I will be at a doctor's appointment, so we won't have a Jeopardy that day. But maybe I could schedule one for Tuesday night. I don't know. We'll see if you guys want to play again. Tasneem says, hey, may I please get your email so I can send you the DBQ? Yeah, absolutely. Here it is. And then if you send me a DBQ to give you feedback, just drop it in a Word doc or a Google Doc, and that way I can put the comments right in there. Gary says, even my own team, because of my insane wisdom. Oh, okay. Well, I don't know. Ethan might have something to say about that. He hasn't been joining these lives. I wonder where he's been. I have to check on him. Okay, guys, as long as you don't have any other questions, I'm going to hop off of here. We'll be back tomorrow night at 7. Thanks for hanging in with me. We almost made it to 2 hours. What? You guys are such like history studious. I love it. I love it. I can feel the vibes. You're going to do awesome on this exam. I can totally feel it. Can you guys feel it? I feel it. I feel it. Bye, Isabella. Have a good night. I really appreciate you joining in. I will see you guys tomorrow. You are so welcome. Thank you, NNE. Thank you, Gary. That will be like a 16 in total. Okay. Oh, Gary. All right. Bye, Rachel. Have a great night. I'll talk to you all tomorrow. Adios.